You're such an asshole!
Hello, children. Old Cappy here. Kind of interesting question. Hey, asshole. Being somewhat of an asshole myself, going so far as to write the words pedantic asshole on a t-shirt wearing in public, I'm usually the one answering these questions. That said, I was looking for an excuse to toss a couple bucks your way and thought of something that could use a different perspective. My question is, what is the most underrated band in the latter 20th century, and why is it Portishead? That's a joke. He's joking. We have another one. The follow-up discussion is whether or not malinvestment, in the Austrian sense, can affect culture as well as the more material side of the economy. And does this explain the degeneration of art both in the 1960s onward, but also during the Roaring '20s into World War II? Is pop music the death knell of dying, debt-saturated societies? Let me know your preferred payment method given how much you bitch about them. I figure you're a Wells customer as I am. No, I used to be a Wells, so I used to be an employee and a customer, and then I got out of both. Ba ba ba, booty boo, booty 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 boo. Boom. Alright. Cheers, Sam. So this is a real interesting question. I had to think about it a little bit. And there's a couple sub-questions within it. Will malinvestment in the Austrian sense, can that affect culture as well as the more material side of an economy? So let's start there. Yes, not can, it will. Because malinvestment is another word for recessions. The recession back in the olden days, I don't know what they teach economics now, but back in the olden days they'd say a recession is the inefficient allocation of resources. The study of economics was the efficient allocation of resources. And when you invest trillions more than needs to be invested in, say, like .coms, as we did in the late 90s, or housing, as we did in the mid-aughts, that comes to bite you in the ass, essentially, where you've overinvested. Now, not every dollar is going to be as efficient. Not that many people need homes. Heck, 1 in 30, I think, .coms actually made money. You could say the cryptocurrency bubble was another example of that, where you really technically only need one cryptocurrency, but there were 1,200 at the peak of the bubble. I don't know how many there are now. I know all you cryptocurrency enthusiasts. Dogecoin. And so when you misallocate that level of money, significant percentages of the population of the economy, into investments that just don't pay off or people aren't going to buy, then GDP contracts. You go into a recession because that money would have been better invested in other investments that would have had long-term. They weren't bubbles. We should have invested in semiconductor plants instead of houses, or whatever was going on in the economy at the time that would have been a better investment and more efficient. So when you have malinvestment, can that affect the culture? It immediately does, because of simple economics. And then that, in a sense, will also affect the culture. So can you affect the culture? It does immediately, as well as the more material side of the economy. Yes, that's exactly what Austrian economics is about. And does this explain, this is the second, third part of the question, does this explain the degeneration of art both from the 60s onward, but also during the Roaring '20s into World War II? I would have to look at the Roaring '20s art. I didn't think the '20s had bad art. And his pop music, the death knell of dying or debt-saturated societies. I'll get to that one later. Does this explain the degeneration of art from the 60s onward? I would say no. I would say, it could have a tangential effect, and I'll make an argument that it depends what we do with malinvestment. Do we let people sustain the costs and suffer the consequences of malinvestment and learn from their mistakes, or do we bail them out and we protect them all the time and they never learn from their mistakes and they never suffer? But first, what I would say is that culture is not purely driven by economics. Yes, economics will affect culture in one way or another, but I would say it's more sociological, psychological causes as to modern art or minimalism art. Not minimalism, the financial philosophy, I made a dot on on a white sheet of paper, and now I'm going to sell it to the Walker Art Center. That is more caused by, you could say, economic growth, booming economic times, and you spoil people rotten. I would point out to the baby boom generation, where they had everything handed to them. And again, part economics, but it was a booming economy and good economic times, and parental spoiling and the lowering of standards, raising softer people. So this goes, I would argue, more in the cyclical sense. Hard times make good people make good times. Good times create soft people create bad times, and thus that cycle repeats. So good times created soft people. And so now you definitely see it in terms of art. You definitely see it in terms of culture, pop music, architecture, fashion. My God, you guys want to see horrible fashion. Look at the 70s, the late 70s, what they were dressing us kids up in. Watch the movie Slapshot and look what Paul Newman is wearing. You're like, what? And that was the baby boomers. It was, you know, you think the millennials or Gen X was the first to like lower standards so much that we could be proud of, you know, non-accomplishments and non-achievements. No, it was the baby boomers. They're like, look, man, who's the idiot? They all thought he was the greatest artist ever. It's not Elton John, he's a piano player. This guy, he was in New York, he painted the Campbell's soup thing. And all the minimalist art, it was just a bunch of too much money, creating soft people. Not to pick on the Walker Art Center. None of you have ever heard of this place before, and thank God you haven't, because it's not a real art center. What it is a place for the retarded trust fund babies, and people older than me, mind you. No, this is where the retarded trust fund babies go to post their crappy art for rich people in Minnesota. And it's not a coincidence that's in Kenwood, which is the old money, old school neighborhood where all the money is long gone. These trust funders are running out the money and clock. But you know, here, hey, look, my retarded 48-year-old son made a really crappy drawing, and it's at the Walker Art Center. Oh, how wonderful, Mrs. Pillsbury or Mr. Dayton and other Minnesota families. So I don't think malinvestment usually will bring on hard times. It will bring on a recession. One could argue that malinvestment in flooding an economy with money, bailing people out, and thus denying them the hard times that would forge them and make them good artists, good musicians, etc., etc. That's where I would say malinvestment in the form of bailing people out, intervening in the economy when you should not be, trying to smooth out this business cycle instead of just letting people take their lumps. I would argue that, and not just necessarily government spending, but artificially low interest rates, printing off money through the central bank, expansionary government policies where you never have to suffer the cost and consequences of your mistakes. There never is a recession. You're bailed out. That creates weaker people, and then you can make in a more direct economic argument that would lower the quality and caliber of art, music, architecture, creativity, innovation, because there's just no one there. I would also argue that people who go into the arts are traditionally your lazier types. For every true artist, you have at least 500, I mean not 500, but 200 poser wannabes who have no talent and have no work ethic. They may have talent, but they never have the work ethic to actually go and do it. So I would not say it's malinvestment causing a recession, because if you had a recession, those are the hard times that make good people. But if it's malinvestment from TARP bailouts, bailing students out of their student loans, lending them money for worthless degrees that they can go and spend. A lot of people, oh, the student loans are horrible. Well, okay, wait a minute. You got, over a generation or so, you've got multiple trillions of dollars. That money is malinvested into an art history degree or an art degree or something like that, instead of you just becoming a freaking artist. So I could argue in that sense, I could see where malinvestment, especially paying for art degrees or music history degree or music therapy degrees, yeah, that would be a direct cause of the deterioration in art and culture. But generally, economically speaking, I would say it's more good times, whether it's real, as it was in the case of the 50s and early 60s, or artificial, Great Society forward, and certainly the 90s and the aughts, where we just flood the economy with money, bail people out, and you have a nanny state, a welfare state that makes sure you never suffer the costs and consequences of your decisions, and then you never hone, you never galvanize, you never become an accomplished man or woman. You're just a perpetual child, and perpetual children do not have artistic abilities. Is pop music the death knell of a dying, debt-saturated society? Pop music's always kind of been there. No, I would say it's people caused again. Cardi B, I don't know who she is, except then I think Roosh did a video on her, and she's all for female empowerment, and then her video is women degrading themselves, shaking their booties on a boat. I think she was a stripper too. I don't think it's the debt is causing pop music and a decaying music. I think it's the quality of people who go into debt and don't want to pay for things. In other words, it's the debt and the pop music are symptoms of low quality people who don't want to pay for what they want. They will go into debt for it. So if you're starting to see debt-saturated societies, the people themselves have been co-opted and corrupted, like a cancerous body. And so everything else will be going downhill at that point. And you could kind of see that. You could kind of see that. Music, physique, fashion. Yeah, it's just... I wrote the book Enjoy the Decline for a reason. All right, that's it. Questions, answers, assholeconsulting.com. We'll see you guys later. Toodles.